Welcome to 340B Leaders Upfront, a monthly podcast from 340B Report. I'm Anna Mangum, host of this program, which showcases 340B Report's valued sponsors and the crucial role they play in the 340B ecosystem. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing to 340B Report by going to 340breport.com and using the coupon code PODCAST25 to receive a 25% discount. If you didn't hear prior episodes, here's a little bit about me. I've dedicated my career to promoting healthcare access, quality, and equity. I've been a senior leader with a variety of major national advocacy and trade organizations, including 340B Health, where I worked closely with 340B Report publisher and CEO Ted Slasky for over a decade. I'm delighted to be part of the 340B Report team and to be working with Ted. In this exciting new episode, I chat with two senior leaders at VytlOne, a comprehensive pharmacy services company. Joel Wright, President of Pharmacy Services, and John Stevens, Senior Vice President of Transformation and Analytics. VytlOne is an Ultra Diamond sponsor of 340B Report, the highest level of sponsorship. We're very grateful for VytlOne's investment in 340B Report. Today, we'll catch up with Joel and John, learn more about them, and gain insights about their company. We look forward to learning more about their careers, the solutions that VytlOne provides, and the areas that 340B providers should be thinking about. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us.
So let's start with a little bit more about each of you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your life before 340B, including where you grew up, where you went to college, and what you majored in?
Sure. I'm happy to start, John, and then I'll give it to you. But I grew up in a small town in rural Michigan, went to Ferris State University, and was a pharmacy major.
And hi, I'm John Stevens. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I went to DePauw University, a small liberal arts school in Indiana, majoring in economics. And while I was there, was a management fellow, which is an honors business program. And then more recently received an executive MBA from Northwestern's Kellogg School of Business. And they have a whole healthcare pathway that I was able to be a part of as well.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, Joel, you had an extensive pharmacy career at Walgreens. John, you had a stint at AllianceRx in addition to working in consulting. What were your career paths before you became senior leaders at VytlOne?
Sure. I spent my entire career in pharmacy, starting out as a pharmacist for Walgreens right out of college. And from there, I moved up through different levels of management, ultimately moved over and took over the infusion business, which Walgreens ran, and did that for 7 years before coming back and running the Walgreens stores that were in the Southeast region. So essentially everything from the Carolinas over to Alabama and down through Puerto Rico. And then from there, I came into specialty and then was the CEO at AllianceRx for 7 years before joining VytlOne.
Terrific. John?
Yeah, I started in consulting and really enjoyed solving complex problems with many different stakeholders and was able to work all across the globe for some of the financial services companies, and then shifted into more of an innovation and product development role, which is actually where I ended up meeting Joel and helped lead the integration for AllianceRx Walgreens Prime. And while I was there, was leading the 340B team and many of the support functions for a pharmacy. And once again, those cross-functional problems, different types of people really grounded in data was helpful from my consulting background to be able to apply that to pharmacy.
Terrific. John, having initially worked in areas outside of 340B, what do you think is unique about the 340B space in pharmacy and in healthcare more broadly?
Yeah, and I may start more broadly with healthcare. And there's so many different players, different companies, different people that are a part of getting a patient the medication they need. There's the pharmaceutical manufacturers, there's the drug distributors and wholesalers, there's the pharmacies, there are the payers like the pharmacy benefit managers, as well as the health plans. There's obviously in 340B, there's third-party administrators. And so there's so many different players and everybody's really focused on how do we get patients the medication that they need. The thing that was surprising to me was how challenging it can be to get the information around a patient and the data to provide care for those patients. And that's a similar challenge that we have within 340B is really understanding what we know about the patient and how do we make sure that we're doing things appropriately. And a big challenge in solving that is information, data, to help provide better care for the patients, but also to appropriately qualify those prescriptions as 340B.
Well, there's definitely a lot of moving parts. Joel, VytlOne was originally founded as a single community pharmacy, Maxor Drugs, in 1926 in Amarillo, Texas, which is almost a century ago. VytlOne recently rebranded from Maxor. Tell us a bit about why your company rebranded and what this represents about your evolution.
Yeah, so we are very proud of the 100 years of innovation that Maxor brought, but we also wanted to recognize that the company has evolved and changed, and is really laser focused in the helping health systems and health centers as they take care of some of the most vulnerable patients in the country. And so we felt that it was important that we had a name and a brand which helped magnify that and make sure that we were recognized for our work around health systems and health centers.
Well, that's really such a critical part of 340B. Tell us, Joel, then, what are some of the key services that VytlOne provides to 340B stakeholders and the larger healthcare supply chain?
Yeah, we run pharmacies for not-for-profit entities. We do everything from helping them with procurement, actually running the pharmacy, to providing meds to beds, as well as specialty medication. So all facets of both hospitals and health centers, we are there to assist. We also are doing some work in the tribal area. And so another area of 340B where we're able to help them really navigate some of the challenges between the federal supply schedule and 340B pricing.
So, Joel, what is it about VytlOne then what makes it particularly valuable to the 340B provider community?
I think it's the expertise that we bring. It is one thing to know pharmacy. It's another thing to have 340B and have that be a very significant part of it. There's a significant amount of regulation and challenges. So when you look at some of these federally qualified health centers, they often are really passionate and good at taking care of their patients, which are some of the most vulnerable in the country. But they don't have that pharmacy and 340B expertise to be able to bring those services. And so that's where we can come in and partner with them. And we always want them to own the pharmacy and that we provide that service of managing and caring for those patients, but making sure it's done in a way that is appropriate and provides the highest level of care.
Yeah, well, 340B is definitely a specialty, and then there's specialties within that specialty, as you talked about. John, let's shift gears for a minute. I want to talk about the Health Resources and Services Administration's Rebate Pilot for 340B. The program to date has operated as a upfront discount. This would be a departure from that. As listeners may know, the pilot was set to begin on January 1st, but was halted by a federal judge who found that HRSA violated the Administrative Procedures Act by failing to adequately consider the impact of the pilot on covered entities or providers. The Department of Health and Human Services actually on Monday indicated that it will not pursue its appeal. It had initially appealed this decision. How has this evolving situation impacted covered entities, and how are you supporting them through this time of uncertainty?
HRSA's 340B rebate pilot program already has had an impact on covered entities over the past 90 days, and teams are still working through that now and will continue to impact them moving forward. Over the past 90 days, many covered entities have been working with their 340B teams, working with their pharmacy platforms, working with third-party administrators to get ready for the program. In many cases, they were reprioritizing their people and their teams, working late nights to get ready for the program. While the program was halted on December 29th, the amount of time and effort that people had put into that's not time that you can get back. Currently, there continues to be uncertainty on whether the judge's ruling was going to be overruled or if the program was going to be restarted. So for example, at VytlOne, we finished completing all of the builds, all of the data analysis that was required, and developed a restart plan so that if it's restarted, we're ready to go within 48 hours. I'm assuming many cover entities are looking at that themselves to make decisions now. Do they complete the work that they had started? And how much of their time and resources are they putting towards that? And once again, we're making sure that we're ready in case the program restarts as it was initially designed. Looking forward with the conversations with the judges as well as with HRSA, there may be changes to what the 340B rebate pilot program becomes. And so continuing to monitor those changes, likely looking 6 to 12 months out to get to a point where we're able to restart. And we're very hopeful that HRSA, as well as the people that are developing the pilot program, are taking the feedback from covered entities, from 340B report, and making sure that they're making the program as compliant and necessary as needed without putting additional burden on covered entities.
Yeah, thanks for that excellent overview of the situation. There is definitely a lot of uncertainty. If the Department of Health and Human Services decides to stand this up again, they would have to show that they comply with the Administrative Procedures Act and, again, consider the impact on providers, which you spoke to. John, as the pilot program evolves, and again, there is uncertainty here, what solutions do you see to mitigate the concerns of all the stakeholders, and particularly without creating as much burden on covered entities?
There are many ideas that are out here. And I think one of the main justifications for HRSA's 340B rebate pilot program was for the Medicare drug price negotiation program. So Medicare started negotiating drug prices, and those were drug prices that went live on January 1st. And they're giving a discount for Medicare patients. And the justification for the 340B rebate pilot was that they would be getting the lower of the Medicare price or the 340B price. And the solution that HRSA recommended to solve that was the 340B rebate pilot program. However, there are many ways that you could solve the overlapping cost discounts with the Medicare drug price negotiation program. Medicare's already established a mechanism to collect data and to identify what is the appropriate rebate to be paid. That's Medicare's transaction facilitator, the MTF program. And they're able to identify 340B prescriptions as part of that process. And so if there are ways to enhance that process or to use the existing mechanisms to solve a fit for purpose solution to avoid the overlapping costs, that seems like a much better solution versus trying to create a whole new structure that's actually broader than just Medicare. It supports uninsured patients. It supports commercial patients. So really trying to focus on the problem that we're solving, which is the Medicare drug price negotiation program and how to receive the lower of that price or the 340B price, and really focusing on that problem and developing a solution for that problem seems to be a way that would be best for covered entities and reduce the burden on that really challenged provider group.
Well, it's a really tough nut to crack for sure. It's an interesting solution. John, there's been a massive amount of change for 340B covered entities in the last 90 days, as you say. We talked about the rebate pilot. In addition to that, could you summarize some of the other changes and how they're impacting your clients and customers?
For sure. And we just talked about the Medicare drug price negotiation program. That still is live as of January 1. And that is still going to have an impact on covered entities who are going to have a working capital impact. So they're going to be getting the MFP rebate, the maximum fair price rebate. That's going to be coming to them hopefully within 14 to 21 days. And so they're still going to have a working capital impact, or they're going to be giving away money, but not getting it paid back. They're also going to receive less reimbursement. And so their margins are going to be lower for those Medicare negotiated drugs. In addition to that, there were 5 manufacturers that are part of the program, the Medicare program, that reduced their list prices. So they reduced their wholesaler acquisition cost, which we call WAC. And so those are going to have significant impacts on pharmacy profitability and pharmacy margins. Some of the drugs were reduced 40 to 70%. And so we're seeing deflation in the drug supply chain. And that's going to mean that there's a reduction in the margin for these pharmacies. And so Joel talked about the federally qualified health centers who are really taking care of vulnerable populations. They're going to see reductions in their margin that are really going to impact them in Q1 and Q2.
Those are some stiff headwinds for sure. Joel, you mentioned Medicare's drug price negotiation program that went live on January 1st. How would you compare and contrast the timing, communication, and preparedness between CMS's Medicare negotiation program and HRSA's rebate pilot program?
Oh, they were night and day different. With the Medicare drug price negotiation program, the list of drugs was published more than a year in advance. The registration and the websites were live, and pharmacies were registering months in advance. The PBMs were working through how they were going to administer their portion of it. And so there was a very thorough and well thought out, as well as question and answer period that went on before the program was rolled out. So it was very thoughtful, I would say. Now, that doesn't make it positive. John already pointed out some of the negative impacts that can have on the pharmacies. But by contrast, the rebate program got announced late summer. They literally, while the government was shut down, all of a sudden we get an announcement that it is going to go live on the last date that they could tell us which drugs were going to go live. And the Beacon platform and things just frankly weren't ready. And so for us, it felt extremely rushed and created a tremendous amount of burden on the covered entities and people like us who serve those covered entities to try to prepare for what the impact was going to be and even calculate what the cash flow implications were going to be. So I would say that the two couldn't have been more different in how they were rolled out. We are excited, frankly, for the pause on the rebate pilot to allow the covered entities to have that full understanding of what the impact is going to be and to prepare if, in fact, it actually starts and goes into effect in the future.
Yes, well, that was definitely a very short runway that entities had to get ready for the rebate pilot. Joel, a handful of manufacturers, including those with drugs in the Medicare negotiation program and the pilot, dramatically reduced the list price of their drugs. What's the impact of these changes on covered entities and pharmacies in general? And are you anticipating continued drug price deflation?
Yeah, it's an interesting time. And I think that we've seen a couple of things happen here where the government has went and started talking about direct to consumer. There's been price negotiation for the first time by Medicare going live. And we are seeing different pharma companies take different strategies. Some have been to reduce their price. What that does to the pharmacies is it squeezes margin and really puts some pressure on them unless they recontract, which is always challenging. The other thing that it does is it just creates uncertainty of where that's going to be because it could also impact the net ceiling price for 340B as well as penny pricing. So we're very aware and paying very close attention to it. As far as do we anticipate continued price deflation, I think that we're in a pretty unique period right now. And so I think we're watching very closely, but I do think that we're going to see price deflation maybe for the first time in my time in pharmacy.
That is a dramatic change indeed. There's so much going on. John, what additional impacts do you see on CEs through 2026 due to manufacturer price reductions?
There could be an impact on the 340B ceiling price. And so the way the 340B ceiling price is calculated is it takes the average price that manufacturers are selling their product for. It takes into consideration discounts. It also takes into consideration an inflation penalty. And so for many of the manufacturers that are part of the Medicare negotiated program, their average price that they're selling their drugs for is going to go down. And so the 340B ceiling price will go down. So for those manufacturers, that will actually reduce the cost for the covered entity. So the covered entity margin will actually get a little bit bigger for drugs. However, for those manufacturers that took really significant price changes, the average price that they're selling their drugs will go down, but they also may lose their inflation penalty. And the inflation penalty is when the drug manufacturers have increased the price of their drug faster than inflation. And so if they take a 40% reduction of price, that could reduce the inflation penalty. And so what that means is, and that's how you get penny price drugs, that's how you get drugs that are really inexpensive for 340B. And so the net effect for the manufacturers that are taking very large price changes, price reductions, is that their 340B ceiling price, instead of going down, which is what you would expect, may actually go up. And if it goes up, the cost for the covered entity to buy that drug will be higher. Their costs will go up. And so at the same time, you have the reimbursement that they're getting through Medicare or through commercial payers going down, and you have their costs going up. And so you could have a situation where their margin is going down in the first quarter because of the reduction in revenue. And then in the third quarter, it could actually go down or be squeezed because of the increase in their costs. And so that's a situation that we're continuing to monitor. The good news is we should have an understanding of that in second quarter, because the second quarter is when they're releasing what happened in the first quarter. And so we will know that information, and we will see different impacts in the third quarter. And so really the interplay between their list price and their 340B ceiling price is what we're looking at that can have impacts on covered entities. And you asked earlier if we're going to continue to see drug price deflation. And that could be what we see for certain manufacturers that are doing the calculation between what's best for them long term, looking at their list price, but also how that impacts their 340B ceiling price.
Thanks so much, John, for that excellent tutorial and just all the math there. There's so much math for folks to keep track of in operating this program, and even more so now. Joel and John, what should covered entities be focused on in the next 90 days and also in the next year?
The first piece is what John just talked about there, is make sure they understand what the margin impacts are going to be related to price changes by manufacturers. I think the second one is to really understand the cash flow impacts. Even as we talk about the maximum fair price with Medicare, that's going to have a cash flow impact on covered entities. And the third is to be ready and paying attention to what happens with the rebate pilot. I don't think we've heard the last of this from pharma. And so I think paying very close attention and making sure they understand both the cash flow and also burden and reporting and how they're going to do it is important for them to stay on top of here in this period.
And I would add on to that from a more tactical standpoint. You're starting to see the maximum fair price rebates starting to get paid at the end of January. And so I'd be getting really deep with your pharmacy team and your 340B team to make sure that you're receiving the appropriate payment. And specifically, if there's a rebate that's denied because they believe that the claim was 340B and it wasn't, or if there's a claim that thought was 340B and got reversed, making sure that you're getting the MFP rebate that you're entitled to. So really tactically trying to understand how you're getting paid, anything that's getting denied, and then how you're handling those reversals is really critical. And then I would say the other piece of it is looking at your hospital, your covered entity, your health system formulary. And so analyzing the formulary to understand what's the most clinically appropriate drug for your patients, and also how does that get to the lowest cost for your patients. And so every hospital, every health system, every health center has a formulary that really drives the prescribing habits of their providers. And taking a look at that and working through your appropriate committees to assess what's best for patients from a clinical standpoint, as well as from a lowest cost standpoint, can really help as there's so many different biosimilar options and options that are out there. Just reassessing that's going to be an important thing as part of your 2026 strategy.
So, Joel, what are some other areas in which VytlOne is currently helping clients?
So VytlOne, outside of helping with managed pharmacy services, we also have a PBM. And that PBM helps the covered entities, specifically hospitals, be able to utilize their own assets to care for their patients. So both specialty as well as mail order, the services they want to provide, we enable them to provide. That's very different than how the other large PBMs work, where they look to pull those scripts away from the hospital. So it's another way that we believe we can provide value back into those health systems.
That's great. Well, thanks for that overview. And I want to ask you, you've had so many great insights. Wanted to ask, do you have any final words of advice or thoughts for the 340B community, given all that is going on, all that we're anticipating, all the unknowns, of course, uncertainty?
Yeah, I think that my final words of advice would be that this program is going to continue to evolve. It is far from static, and they need to make sure that they have a very good understanding of where it's going. And either that is directly through them or through a partner. And at VytlOne, we are happy to help and be that bridge. I would also encourage people to advocate. I think advocacy and helping people understand why the 340B program is so important is critical.
I would just add on that to Joel's point that the 340B program continues to evolve and change. And it's easy to look at the program and have concerns or feel like there's too many headwinds. But ultimately, this is to help covered entities take care of the patients that need it. It has bipartisan support across the country. You've seen many states that are putting legislation in place to support the covered entities that need the support in their states. And so I think you're going to continue to see advancement and evolution of the program. And by better understanding your program, better understanding it with data, better understanding what the impacts could be, it will allow you to evolve as the program evolves. And to Joel's point, advocate for solutions that are going to be best for you and best for the patients that you serve.
Well, 340B is definitely a complex program and very dynamic. It always has been, and it likely will be for the future. So thank you again so much for joining us today. And to our audience, stay tuned for our next podcast next month. If you're not already a subscriber, please consider subscribing to 340B Report by going to 340breport.com and using the coupon code podcast25 to receive a 25% discount. It's the best way to stay on top of the latest developments in the ever-changing 340B program. Also, check out our other podcast, Inside 340B Report, to hear our journalists discuss the latest 340B developments.